Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me is UberHansen, and we are here because we are excited because the Bills are 9-2, because the Bills just beat the Chiefs and they just knocked them off from the undefeated ranks, and the Chiefs can suck it. Oh my gosh. Great game. What a game. And already we have a very lively chat talking about soup. Amazing. I could not put together a better start to a chat than talking about soup in the middle of fall. Man, the vibes are high. The vibes are immaculate. Uber, how are you?
I'm phenomenal. As somebody who literally predicted the Bills to lose yesterday, predicted that in my SI write-up, to see them win and win by 2 scores and win in the fashion they did without the players that they were missing this game, it fills me with so much hope and optimism for the future, where I start to think some crazy thoughts in my head that I otherwise would not have thought I would have ever thought this season. It was one of those wins where, as much as people want to mitigate it and be like, well, we do it every year, like we got to wait until see what happens in the playoffs. It's like, no, I'm going to relish in it. I enjoy every win, whether it's the Bills beating the Carolina Panthers or it's the Bills beating the 07 Patriots. Like, I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm really, really enjoying this, especially the narratives that are being kind of shut down around the NFL, or the panic that you're seeing from Chiefs fans and Ravens fans and Bengals fans. Meanwhile, us Bills fans are just like, hey, we got a bye week coming up. Like, we're good, 9-2. We're happy as can be.
It is. If you had told me before the season started, and asked me like, what do you think the Bills will be going into the bye week? Bye week is week 12. Yeah. You're like, probably like 7-4 or something like that. And that would be me being positive, right? That things are working. The wide receiver room actually worked out, which it eventually did when they actually got a wide receiver one. To be 9-2 in week 11, going into your bye week, having just beaten the Chiefs, when people are like just starting to try and get the narrative of like, oh, or have the Bills even beaten anyone this year? Have they really beaten anyone? And it's like, yeah, we did. So it is just, I could not possibly think of a better, like, other than just a straight up blowout, which I don't know. In some ways, obviously that would have made me feel better. That also probably would have made me feel more nervous of like, okay, well, the Chiefs aren't gonna do that again. Whereas it felt like yesterday the Chiefs were like not just playing well, but they were showing some new stuff that they had not been using during the rest of the season. Same thing for the Bills, by the way. I mean, it was definitely a great exchange of two teams who clearly understood that this is the team to beat in their minds, right? Like, the Bills need to beat the Chiefs and the Chiefs need to beat the Bills. Like that, this is what was great about this game, was that both teams clearly acknowledge who they are, who their opponent is, and they played up to it. It was just a phenomenal game, and even better for us that the Bills end up winning this game and winning the way that they did. And
I'm with you. Like, if it was a blowout, I would be probably more happy today, but there'd be a side of me that's really, really nervous. Like, oh, the Chiefs just had an awful game. Because I don't think you can blow out the Chiefs in the same manner as I don't think that I say you can't really blow out the Bills, though we saw the Ravens do it. I think that, like, the fact that the Bills beat them in a close game where a critical late game decision was the right decision by Sean McDermott, which I'm sure we'll get into later. It just, like, it was one of those games where it was electrifying the entire game, but the Bills were the better team for most of that game. Like, I left that being like the Bills were the better team. It doesn't necessarily translate in January, but for at least right now, I feel like I can say that.
I think I'm with you there, because, like, to do this and to feel like during this game, at least for me, it never felt like the Bills were missing Spencer Brown, Dalton Kincaid, and Keon Coleman in a good way, because Brian Van DeMark was fantastic. Really, the entire offensive line did so well in pass protection, and Osiris Torrance, who, if there was a knock coming out of him in college, it was that his feet weren't great, and that was going to affect him in pass protection, and that's been an issue for him throughout his short career so far. But yesterday against Chris Jones, that man brought it. I mean, he brought it all game long against a player that has kind of dominated the Bills in big matchups like this. And it was just a phenomenal performance by Osiris Torrance and the offensive line as a whole. It's just phenomenal. So before we get too far deep into things, let's take some comments from the folks at home. Just to Canoe, starting us off by saying, before we get started, is soup a meal? Okay, so you know what? Let's save this for true or rubbish, because we're going to do true or rubbish later, and I'm going to write this down right now before I forget. So we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this first. Thank you, just Tip Canoe, for starting yourself hot. RJ Melville. So Land Clark wasn't so Land Clarky yesterday. It's a Thanksgiving miracle. I'm not. Far be it from me to try and fuel RJ's conspiratorial vibes against all referees. That being said, was it a good? You and I were talking beforehand that at the very least it wasn't like a flag fest, which was good, and I appreciate that a lot because it really made the game feel like an actual game, not just something that kind of happened in between officials trying to insert themselves wherever they could. So on that sense, I will give him that credit. But there were some real bad missed calls in particular. It wasn't like they made a call that was bad. It was just that there were some things where it's like, hey, what you doing over here, buddy? What are you looking at over here? And so anyway, that being said, I suppose from that angle, from the other angles, it just whatever. It is what it is. Keon Jackie, Josh Allen, MVP. Prove me wrong. I won't. Because that would be disingenuous. And we'll talk about Josh Allen MVP. That's for sure. RJ also says, I actually feel positive about the season, which also terrifies me. Fair. And a good look into your psyche in general, right? That that you feel positive about the Bills for the first time in what I can only imagine is years, if not decades. And that still scares you. Very George Costanza of you, RJ. Josh Allen is not just the best QB in the NFL; he's the best player in the NFL. Says music blogger 87. That's what an MVP is. That's what they do. RJ says the Bills blew out KC in 2021, didn't they? Yes, they did. That was 2021. That was the multi-touchdown game from Dawson Knox, or maybe just a couple of big plays, including a touchdown.
Yeah, the one I remember, the big one on the right sideline that he was wide open. Josh just hits
wide open. Yeah. Daniel Sorensen getting burnt as he often did. But Steve Spagnuolo hates rookies, right? So I don't know if there was a rookie or not. Was there? I feel like they were. Dang it! Now I gotta look this up. So I remember that being a big storyline that Daniel Sorensen was starting over someone else, but I can't remember. Was it Juan Thornhill? I think it was Juan Thornhill.
It might have been Juan Thornhill, yeah. And Chiefs fans were livid because they were like, Sorensen sucks, put Thornhill in. Actually, where's Juan Thornhill now?
He's in Cleveland.
Okay. That adds up.
Yeah. Let's see. Defensive backs. Yeah, I think it's Juan Thornhill. It's just how these rosters have changed over time. Man, just a great game, just a great time. What a time to be alive. Just fantastic. Any other? I've talked enough. What other thoughts do you have?
So I want to throw out one topic here because, of course, Chiefs fans do this, and I find this annoying. I've seen Bills fans do this to other fan bases too. It drives me nuts. the people that say like, oh, this is your Super Bowl, I hate that so much because the implication of it is that you don't get to celebrate anything. And I'm
Right.
always against that idea. Like I said at the start of this show, I'll celebrate the Bills beating the Panthers if they get the chance to play them. Incidentally, the Chiefs get to play the Panthers next week, and I bet you their fans will celebrate like they won the Super Bowl when they beat the Panthers. I just think it's such a silly thing. And I will say, too, it becomes even more silly because Bills fans know better than anybody that this is not our Super Bowl. Like, we beat them every single year in the regular season. We need to beat them later on. Like, the Bills Super Bowl is and will always be, as long as number 17 is behind center, the literal Super Bowl. Like, that's the goal. The goal isn't beating the Chiefs. And if the Bills lost to the Chiefs yesterday, the Super Bowl would still be the Super Bowl. So it just drives me nuts that fans try to mitigate another team's win and at the same time also try to cope with a loss of their own by saying, oh, that's your Super Bowl. It's just so that one of the silly things, along with the term generational talent, that drives me nuts in the
NFL. Speaking of generational talent, Caleb Williams had a kind of bounce back game, or at the very least didn't look like he was lost. I mean, it wasn't a great game, and it wasn't a great ending for the Bears. Technically speaking, I mean, I said this to someone I work with who's a Bears fan, and he was like devastated at losing to the Packers again. And I was like, no, I don't know about that. I mean, Caleb Williams definitely looked better without Shane Waldron calling plays. He looked more confident. He looked more decisive. He was using his legs more, which is a good thing. And, losing again to the Packers, I mean, you kind of can't. It's another reason to not keep Matt Eberflus, which they should not do. Like, they have to get rid of Eberflus because you cannot keep doing this with quarterbacks. So I was like, it's kind of sort of the best outcome you could have gotten, but I
do feel genuinely bad for Bears fans, and a lot of, I don't know why this happened, maybe because of the things I've said about Caleb Williams. A lot of Bears videos came through my timeline on the old Twitter, and it was a lot of reaction videos, which I've come to realize that probably 75% of those are fake and done after the fact.
Yeah,
which you can tell relatively easily now that that's the case, but the ones that were legit, whether they were people in the stadium or they were people that had like live streams going, and their reactions, it like almost brought me to tears because I'm like, this is to some extent like what I felt like whenever we played the Patriots. It's like, why can't, or just the Bills, the drought era Bills, like anytime something could go wrong, it did go wrong. And it's like, I don't understand, like, what did we do? And I'm watching Bears fans just be like, this is my life. Like, it's never going to end. Something wrong happened in Chicago that the NFL gods will never forgive us for. It's got to be awful. Like, I'm so happy we live in the era of 17 in Buffalo right now, because while we have heartbreaking losses, like serious heartbreaking losses, the good to some extent the good outweighs those bad. Like, just Josh Allen rushing for that touchdown last night, that alone is like the highlight of most teams' seasons, and that's just Josh Allen, what he does every week. It's astounding.
Music is life, love, self. What a name. What a life. What a philosophy. Music is life, love, self. I kind of love this.
Okay.
Come back to the show. I feel like this is the first time you've said something on the show. Come back to the show. We need more of music is life, love, self. What would you rate Ron Miller performance on the scale of 1 to 10? Probably like an 8. Yeah. I mean, he was impactful. He was rushing well. Even he got a sack, a half a sack, something like that. Just looked like more of the player that we want him to be, and that's quite literally all you can ask for. The defensive line as a whole, as Paul Smith says here, finally bringing the pressure on Mahomes that we've needed. I mean, it was immediate. I mean, that was how they got the first interception, was by coming down, and as Mahomes stepped up, Daquan Jones came off of his block, or was coming off of his block, getting a hit on Mahomes as he's releasing the ball, and sails over Kelsey's head and goes right into Taylor Rapp's arms. And it was just exactly what should happen and what the Bills have been missing. And if they can continue to do that, especially against the Chiefs offensive line, that, I mean, we've talked about this. Those three guys in the middle, so good.
Insane.
Trey Smith will bully you as a run blocker. Creed Humphrey and Joe Tooney are some of the best at their positions, but their tackles absolutely blow. I mean, it is brutal. I mean, Jawan Taylor is at least passable, right? Like he's not like a turnstile necessarily, but certainly overpaid. This left tackle situation. If this was any other team, they would not be able to get away with this because it is abysmal how bad that entire situation is, and their solutions for it have been equally bad, which is why they're in this position. They were just like, oh, then I guess we'll draft Wanye Morris, and then we'll draft Kingsley Suamataia, and one of those guys will be our left tackle. And it's like, that's your solution? And that was after last year when they said, yeah, we'll sign Donovan Smith after the draft, and he'll be our left tackle until Wanye Morris is ready. And it's like, that's what is your thought process here? What are you thinking? No other team would be able to get away with this because no other team has Patrick Mahomes as quarterback to mitigate all of the ridiculousness that comes with having a terrible group of left tackles. But my gosh, the way in which, I'm sure, because I'm not in like Chiefs fandom or Chiefs circles, but I have to imagine that there's quite a contingent of those guys who are like, what is Brett Veach doing and why is he still here? Like, that's just bad. That is like borderline. There's a word I'm looking for. What's the word I'm looking for?
Borderline.
Read my mind, Uber. What's the word I'm looking for?
I just had it for a second and it went away.
It's going to come to me in like 10 minutes when I'm talking about something entirely different, but whatever. Malpractice. That's what it is. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Malpractice. That's what it is. Someone call a lawyer on Brett Veach. Jared K says, I didn't notice DeMar. Not sure if that's good or bad. You know, the safeties in general, other than Taylor Rapp getting an interception, I mean, it was a quiet day at the office, generally speaking, other than, I guess, not doing what they were supposed to be doing on a couple of Xavier Worthy plays, one of which went against the Bills, one of which, man, what are you doing, Xavier Worthy, on the sideline, dragging your toe before you have the ball, and then not a bad rookie play, just rough. But yeah, in general, good safety play. And that's always a fun thing.
The one thing I'll add to, and it seems like every week, that both Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin make a couple solo open field tackles that, like, had they not made it, you'd be like, oh, that's going to be a 20, 30-yard gain. I think it was Taylor. I remember Damar Hamlin had one yesterday, but it was closer to the line of scrimmage. But Taylor Rapp had one where he just wrapped up the legs on a play that if he misses the tackle, probably is like a 30-yard gain, 35-yard gain. So, hey, if both Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin can make those solo tackles and avoid, instead of giving up, 10, giving up 30, like, sign me up. And they've played better than Bills fans are giving them credit for this season.
100%.
Because we were spoiled for so long with Poyer and Hyde, they've played pretty damn well. And just, like, at the same time, no quarterback's really shredding this Bills team apart, which is saying something about the safety play. Like, if the safety play was that bad, as some people are making out to be, we'd be getting torched for 300, 400 yards a game, and that's just not happening.
Exactly. And there are many times throughout this season where Taylor Rapp in particular has come up huge. I mean, the three big pass breakups he had against the Jets, this interception to start the game against the Chiefs. Obviously, last week against the Colts, he had an interception when the Colts were starting to drive the ball down the field. And this was somebody that I think a lot of people used as a bit of a kicking or a doormat or whatever. And he's just been a good player this entire season, I think, and he's been doing exactly what they want him to do. And there's not much you can ask for that. Yeah. I mean, he's been playing well, and it's been a great signing. It's somebody that they wanted here, and I'm not personally asking for any more from Taylor Rapp than what has been given to us so far.
He's just a wrecking ball. Like he plays football. He plays football the way they did in like the late 90s, early 2000s, like John Lynch-esque almost, which is wild that he kind of gets away with it too.
Right. So Aaron Quinn of the Cover One Buffalo show. The best Wanya Morris is in Boys to Men. He's not wrong. I mean, shout out Boys to Men. What a great group they were. Still are, right? I'm sure they're alive. They're not that old. I'm not that old.
I don't think they're alive
yet. Speaking of alive, RJ says, hey, who knew Ed Oliver and Daquan were still alive? Man, there was a play, I think Anthony Prohaska of Disguised Coverage highlighted this on Twitter today, where Ed Oliver just blows through like 3 different blocks to get pressure on Mahomes, and he is like hustling to get him, and it didn't matter because Mahomes made a great play. Still,
the touchdown play. Yeah,
this is what happens when you go against one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That's just it.
But that play, like Ed Oliver, strong hands, just physical, like destroying 3 people trying to prevent him from getting to Mahomes. And the only reason he didn't is not any lack of what he did. In fact, he should have probably, like any other quarterback or most other quarterbacks he gets to, it's just Mahomes is better than 99% of the players in football, maybe 100%. So,
yeah. All right. Before we get too deep into this, which arguably we already have, let's talk about our wonderful sponsors, and that is many of you fine folks over here at Cover One Pass. Other side, thank you. There we go. So for $60 a year, this is what you get. You get exclusive content from your favorite people here at Cover One. You get in-depth analysis, you get scheme and player breakdowns, you get news, potentially, who's to say, before everyone else. You get scouting reports, you get analytics, you get access, probably most importantly, to the Cover One Discord server, where you get to talk with just other people who are a part of One Pass, who want to talk about the Bills, who want to talk about analytics, who want to talk about future prospects, who want to talk about video games, music, movies, TV, food, etc., etc. It's a great community that we have built here at Cover One. It's a big part of it. It is the thing that I feel like really sets Cover One apart from other football creators, and it's a unique thing that other people could do, but that we simply do, and not everyone does. And I really appreciate all of you who are in the Discord server and are active there, and it's great to see it always active, like all day, every day. It is popping out in there. So for $60 a year, this is what you get. It's the best $60 on football that you'll spend all year long. I promise you, it's totally worth it, and it's the most direct way to support us as well. Sign up today at cover1.net. It is 100% worth it. All right, so let's get. So we got our show notes here. So just some quick notes right off the top. The Bills are a half game out of the number 1 seed, which is what happens when you are 9-2, and the only other team competing for it is 9-1, and you just beat them. So the Chiefs, whose schedule, which I'll bring up now,
we got like one more.
So we have the aforementioned Panthers, which, I mean, Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks legacy game incoming.
Let's go.
Many people are saying this, and by many people, I mean me. You have the Raider. They've played all of their divisional opponents once already, and they have all 3 remaining again. They have the Raiders in Kansas City, which probably means nothing at this point. You have the Chargers in Kansas City, and the Chargers were very, very close to beating the Chiefs earlier in the season when Justin Herbert was not 100%, and this offense was not playing as well. as they have been recently. You have the Browns, who knows? Like, there's talent there, but they've also traded away talent, and I don't know what to do with that. Probably a win for them there. You have the Texans, who, again, have talent, and maybe tonight against the Cowboys, they can show that they don't look totally and completely discombobulated. But you also have the Chiefs then have the Steelers on Christmas Day, which the Steelers just know how to grind out games that they should not be able to win, and it's in Pittsburgh. And then you have the Broncos to end the year, and the Broncos that close to beating them in Kansas City, and this one is in Denver. So this is not,
dude, honestly,
an easy schedule for them.
Now that when I looked at this like 3 weeks ago or something like that, I was like, Jesus, my God, what a cupcake schedule. Now that you say it out loud, I'm starting to not think it's a cupcake schedule, and they're going to drop a couple of those. The Broncos, the Broncos should have beat them. Them. The Chargers, like you said, not being healthy, and the Steelers. People are sleeping on the Steelers too much. Like I get their limitations, and I watched that game, the Steelers-Ravens game, and I came away not really worried about the Steelers. But that being said, there's a reason that they're also 9-2 or 8-2, 8-2. And they're like a good football team that's well-rounded, and they can beat you as long as one of those parts of that round goes off. And that could be TJ Watt, or that could be George Pickens being silly, or Najee Harris. I don't understand how he's the slowest person on earth, but he somehow picks up yards they have pieces they can win with. I wouldn't be stunned if the Steelers beat the Chiefs. They seem almost built to beat the Chiefs to some extent.
In some ways, they kind of are. And they at least match up with the Chiefs' offense pretty well, because the Steelers' defense just kind of matches up with everyone pretty well, because they're just a really well-coached physical unit. But the other thing really is just that, realistically, the Chiefs are not probably going to lose to the Panthers or the Raiders. Realistically. No. That's unless something absolutely insane happens and Bryce Young completely resurrects his career from the dead, I cannot imagine that happening. The Raiders, same sort of thing. Antonio Pierce is not beating this team. The Chargers, Jim Harbaugh is going to be ready for that game. And they were ready for that game last time. They couldn't quite finish it off. The Browns, who knows? I tend to lean to the fact that the Chiefs will probably win that game. Texans, that could get tricky. The Steelers, that could get tricky. The Broncos in Denver. It could be a pretty rough stretch. They could be on a 2 or 3 game losing streak to end the season.
And the Broncos, possibly, in theory, will be playing for something. They're going to be playing. And somebody brought this up, but this was also my thought yesterday. The Bills beating the Chiefs, at a minimum, it requires the Chiefs to continue to play and play hard the remainder of the season, because the Bills can nip at their heels up until probably the last couple weeks of the season. So it's not like the Chiefs can take their foot off the gas. Now it almost kind of, which is a little bit scary to some extent, it forces them to put that foot on the gas and be like, we got to go now, because they're right there with us, especially if Buffalo can find ways to, say, beat the 49ers and beat the Lions. If they can get through that stretch of games and get to a point where, what do you have left? You have the Patriots, the Jets, the Patriots, and the Rams. The Chiefs are going to be looking over their shoulder we have to win out. We cannot drop one. I think that game yesterday, almost the Bills win did more to the Chiefs than it did to the Bills, in the sense that Kansas City now is going to feel a little bit of pressure from everybody else in the NFL.
100%. And whether or not they should or shouldn't have, or you feel like they should or shouldn't have, the Chargers winning last night against the Bengals is big, because that means that they're continuing to put the pressure onto the Chiefs and pushing them. And it's significant. And it's not going to be, even though they've gotten up to this 9-1 start. It's a great start. Obviously, no one's arguing that, but when you get to that start, you can't then lose a bunch of games and be like, we'll win a couple here and there, because that's more or less what happened to the Eagles last year when they were 10-1, and they were cruising to the end of that season until oh, it turns out this team just isn't very good.
Yeah.
And they've just kind of been getting away with winning a bunch of games that they probably shouldn't have. And it really started on that Monday night game against the Chiefs, where, I mean, I say this as someone who was an Eagles fan. At the end of that game, I was like, the Eagles won, but it sure doesn't feel like it. I mean, it really felt like they got away with a win that they should not have gotten in so many different ways. And it kind of just made you feel like, I don't know about this team down the stretch. And then they proved it by being absolutely miserable and terrible and poorly coached. And then they had I can't get back into the 2023 Eagles. We're not doing this to myself. I will not be the negative one tonight. It's not happening. Not today, Satan.
I'll say for this Chiefs team, like against the Panthers, look, I'm gonna juice that line to 21 points and bet it, because that they're gonna destroy them. That being said, if they for some reason don't, like let's say it comes down to a final possession, or they win by 3 points or something, like it's a tight game, I'm gonna and the Chargers say continue to win. There's a path then where I'm like, maybe the Chargers can sneak and steal that division. Not that I believe that will happen, but the Chiefs have been vulnerable all year. It just so happens that the one team that could take advantage of that vulnerability is the Buffalo Bills, because the Buffalo Bills are a damn good football team that a lot of people in the NFL wanted to pretend like wasn't. But yeah, Kansas City, they're not on the ropes right now. 9-1, they're fine. But there's some issues that could pop up pretty quick if they don't kind of right the ship, because the Bills did beat the snot out of them to some extent last night, and the Chiefs did, it was a close game, and it should have been a close game. But at the end of the game, like, Josh outplayed Pat. Pat hasn't played great this season. I have some questions for the Chiefs now.
100%. Mm-hmm. All right. In addition to all of that, the Bills can clinch the AFC East for the 5th. That's all 5 fingers on my hand. So wild, 5th straight time. With a win and a Dolphins loss. So cool. Remember when this team was rebuilding? Man, that's crazy.
Apparently this offseason?
Yeah, apparently. So let's move into the offense. I'm going to start us off with this question from Music is Life, Love, Self. How do you think the run game looked against the Chiefs defense? Bad.
Yeah.
I mean, if there is a negative from this game, the run game, which has been so important for the Bills and their primary identity on offense, did not look good. Whether that's a result of not having someone like Spencer Brown, or the Chiefs defense really keying in on the run to try and make the Bills one-dimensional when they're down multiple pass catchers, kind of sounds like that was the plan, if you ask me. It just didn't work. It's tough to see because they kept doing it over and over and over again. I also didn't mind them trying to do it because it is an important part of it, and sometimes you just have to kind of keep grinding it, and at a certain point you start to lean on it and you start to get some more movement. It didn't end up happening, but thankfully, once they got into the fourth quarter and it wasn't working, they did shift more towards the pass and making it work and doing more of the screens. And Joe Brady adjusted exactly how he should have. The game plan was correct. The Chiefs came in with a good game plan themselves, as one would expect. They attacked the run game. They couldn't get anything out of it. Okay, now we have to pivot more to the pass game. But we're still going to try on the run game because we have to keep trying to a certain extent. But you had to eventually move into the pass game. You just had to lean into that and give the ball to Josh Allen and make him be the guy that we know that he is. Now, part of the reason why they're able to do that is because the defense played as well as it did and allowed the Bills to kind of have control of this game because they were ahead for so much of this game. And so it didn't feel like you were going out of the pass game in order to chase points. You were going to the pass game because the run game just wasn't working. That's fine. And that's a different scenario.
Yeah, the run game wasn't good yesterday, like you said. But you can't just go away from it entirely. Like, it doesn't work in the modern NFL. Like, you need to have some threat of attempting to run the ball at least. I will say I did get a little frustrated at points. I was like, these first down runs, man, like we're gaining a yard or getting stuff to the line every single freaking time. And that's what made the performance from Josh Allen all the more impressive, because it's like he's always playing from and long scenarios. So every single time they're like, all right, Josh, you get the ball, it's 2nd and 9. Where if you go and you look at what Patrick Mahomes got to deal with, it would be like 2nd and 6 or 3rd and 4, where Allen's always playing 9+. And Allen still outplays Mahomes in that regard. But going to the run game, like, Cook couldn't get going. Davis couldn't get going. Actually, Ty Johnson had the best average of all the runners.
Because they just had him run a couple of times on that 2-minute drill at the end of the half when the Chiefs were playing the pass. And then it was like, oh, okay, we'll get like 16 yards from Ty Johnson on a couple of carries or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the one trump card, and this, to some extent, it's the run game, but it's not the run game, is Josh Allen again. His legs became the biggest problem for the Chiefs this game, whether it was a QB sneak on a 4th and 1 or 3rd and 1, whatever, or it's obviously that 4th and 2nd 26-yard run. Like, the Chiefs also had to be wary of that, and they couldn't defend him. When Allen did take off with his legs, he was successful. They were really good at stopping the run, which they've been good at all season. I'm not going to write home too much about, like, I'm not scared that the Bills' run game is suddenly bad. It just was a bad matchup against a team that has Chris Jones on the interior and has Deshaun Wharton and Michael Dana and like George Karlaftis, like Nick Bolt and Drew Trank. They can stop the run, and the Bills just ran into a team that can stop the run.
Yeah, and that's what happens, and it sucks, but this is something that they've centered their offense around, and I don't think that that's going to change, and I don't think they should change it. It'll be fine. One bad game against a really good defense that's obviously keying on the run. So be it. It happens. Spin0481 says, man, I'm late. And you know what? We forgive you anyway. Because we're very, very gracious people here on the Cover One Roundup. Mm-hmm. It's the first and only time I'm ever going to say that. He also says, I got some beef with Uber and how he does his analytics for who to root for. All right. Sounds like you got some splaining to do.
Yeah, I deal with this stuff. I've been writing Rooting Interest in 2019. So for people that don't know, literally go through the entire slate of NFL games, and I do some work on saying who should the Bills root for, who shouldn't they root for, how valuable is this game, blah, 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 blah. And I always get grief from people because they're like, this team sucks. Like, we shouldn't be rooting for that team. That team sucks. My thing is, I do it from more of a factual standpoint, not my opinion, because I've been burnt in the past from doing it for my opinion. Last year, for instance, I was like, don't worry about the Texans. Texans stink. And then suddenly the Texans go on and win that division. So my rule, and I make this very clear in these write-ups, is like, it's based on fact as much as I possibly can base it on fact. I think people might have got a little worked up this week. For instance, I said root for the Ravens over the Steelers. And the reason for that, just to kind of close out this whole loop here, obviously the Ravens have the head-to-head tiebreaker. The Steelers, if the Steelers win out and the Bills win out, the Steelers are the higher seed than Buffalo. And the reason for that is that the Steelers would have a better conference record than the Bills. The Steelers have one conference loss. Buffalo has 2. So there's a reason that you have to root for the Steelers to drop a game, is because if they go undefeated, it doesn't really matter what the Bills do.
Steelers aren't going undefeated for the rest.
No,
of
they're not. They're not.
They're a good team. They're not that good.
Yeah, I agree.
But that's interesting, and then I appreciate the look under the hood on that. So thank you for calling him out.
Thanks, Ben.
We appreciate
it.
Also says 9-2 in a down year, not too shabby. I agree. Let's see. Sespinar also asks, how many teams have a good run game against the Chiefs? That's good question. It kind of feels like not many teams have had a lot of success running the football against the Chiefs. At least not to like.
They've given up 100. I don't think they've given up 100 yards on the ground this season. I'm not
like
sure.
As a team total, or like a single 100-yard rusher.
I actually just pulled it up. So they gave up 185 to the Ravens.
Right. Makes sense.
and actually 101 to the 49ers and 104 to the Bills. So the Bills actually had the second most rushing yards against that team this entire season.
That's pretty good company to be in. The Ravens and I guess the Niners. Although, okay, so someone else I work with is a Seahawks fan. Also, very confusing. This man is a Seahawks fan. He's a Dodgers fan and a Tampa Bay Lightning fan.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense. I told him that. I'm like, that's very confusing set of fandom that you're toying with here, but whatever. He says like the Seahawks are like the thing he roots for the most. So he came in wearing a Seahawks polo today. And I was like, I'll be perfectly honest. I was so locked into this Bills Chiefs game. I had no idea that the Seahawks won that game until this morning.
Yeah, dude.
Like I was listening to a podcast and then they went into the Seahawks Niners game. I was like, oh, I wonder, like, I know that game was close. I wonder how the Niners pulled that out. And then they started talking about the Seahawks. I'm like, wait, the Seahawks won that game? Oh, man. Niners, rough time for them. But a good time for the Bills because that's their next opponent after the bye week. Also, good time to remind people, Sean McDermott hasn't lost out of the bye week in his entire career as the Bills head coach. Which is a hard thing to do when you're such a terrible coach, but I guess some things work for you.
And that really, really good, like that incredible coach in San Francisco has that team, which has a decent amount of talent on it at 5-5. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Food for thought, something to think about. Let's see. Off memory. This is Charles G. Off memory, I don't recall a single pre-snap penalty for the offensive line. Very clean game for the Bills. I mean, we kind of alluded to this earlier, that it was not a very penalty-heavy game. Some to the detriment of what actually happened on the field, but also, in general, we're okay with not having games turn into a giant flag fest.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs had 6 penalties for 57 yards. The Bills had 3 penalties for 24 yards. I'll take that all day, any day, especially with this team that has had multiple games where they've had more than 10 penalties. Yeah.
Yep. 2 games with 10 plus. Yeah.
So very, very good, very disciplined game today. Music Blogger 87 says Kelsey is cooked. I believe someone. No, it was someone. It was Eric. Who am I kidding? It was Eric. Said that it seemed like the assignment for Terrell Bernard, who is I guess.
Yeah.
For those of you who aren't as terminally online as we are, some fantasy football clown made a. I think it initially started with when Matt Milano comes back, do you take Terrell Bernard off the field instead of Dorian Williams?
Who do you take, Terrell Bernard or Dorian?
Who do you take? And it was like, brother, do you watch the Bills? Did you like screen this question to any Bills fans beforehand? Are you just rage baiting? Like, what are we doing here? So he got properly cooked for that. And he was like, oh, I guess I'm learning that Bills fans think Terrell Bernard is great. He's all right.
Yeah.
It's just like, all right, man, whatever. Anyway,
it's so serendipitous that he had the game he had yesterday too.
Not just the game-ending interception, but as Eric kind of alluded to on Twitter, he was like, I think his job was just follow Kelsey, basically. Like anytime he left the line of scrimmage, he that's just where he was going, and I appreciate that, and I will be looking for that when I watch this game for the next week and a half, just enjoying and eating up every single bit and piece of it.
But isn't that like, as much as I love that, it's also equally frustrating because it's like, if we didn't have Tyrell Dodson and AJ Klein on the field last year in the playoffs,
I don't want to think about that. I'm not thinking about that. The past is the past.
True.
We cannot be burdened by what has been.
And Bernard and Milano was coming. Oh my God.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
More on the offense. Amari Cooper had 2 big catches for 55 yards. I mean, they were early on, which I felt was the right idea. I don't know, it seemed like he was on a bit of a pitch count. I kind of want to see what that actually was.
I had it up. The snap was low.
It was low. So it was 37 total snaps, 51%. So they definitely had him on a pitch count. But that was the right idea, to target him early and target him on big plays, because you needed that early on, and you need to be able to force the Chiefs to say, hey, when he's on the field, which is not going to be all the time, but when he's on the field, we have to do something about that.
Mm-hmm.
We can't let him be one-on-one. We can't let him get deep, or we can't have him get a free release, whatever. That was the right way to do it. Hit him early, hit him often, and they got him at the very least early. So, yeah, it was really, really good for him, even if it was limited. Khalil Shakir. I mean, this stat line, 8 catches for 70 yards. Is that not just like the standard Khalil Shakir stat line? Maybe add another catch for 10 yards and a touchdown, maybe. But like, this is just what he does. High volume. It's not a ton of yards necessarily, but he just comes up clutch so often. And man, talk about good timing for Curtis Samuel to get his first touchdown with the Bills, and 5 catches for 58 yards. I mean, for someone who has been a disappointment this year as a free agent signing, for him to be able to come in to this game when they're down multiple pass catchers, and he has to step up. He has to do something. He went out there and did it. He went and did it.
And he made a couple plays too. Like, it wasn't just Josh fed him ball. He was wide open. He didn't do something. Like, Josh gave him the ball, and then he had his sides. I think he had a first down and he had a touchdown that he created after he caught the ball. So it was one of those, again, it kind of goes to the point from, what was it, last week, where I think we said something similar, like, with Curtis Samuel starting to come on, it's exciting. Oh, I said this with Joe DeRosa. It's exciting that Curtis Samuel is coming on, because it's another weapon. Yeah, it's been disappointing for most of the year, but once everyone is healthy, if this is Curtis Samuel now, and then you bring back Keon Coleman and you get a healthy, Amari Cooper, and Khalil Shakir is hopefully healthy as well, and Dalton Kincaid, like, there's so many weapons to this team that they can pick and choose how they want to attack you. So that's an exciting part of Curtis Samuel's day yesterday.
Interesting. So this is coming in right now. It's not news, but it's earlier in the day. Our Adam Pencil, who is one of our members at Cover One, who does a lot of analytics work. If you are a part of the One Pass subscription, you will see a lot of him in the analytics channel. So keep that in mind if you enjoy that stuff. He said that Sean McDermott was on the Mike Shop radio show earlier, and talked about kind of opened up his thought process into 4th down decision making. So this is Adam kind of paraphrasing here. McDermott and the staff meet during the week, and they try to decide if the game is going to be a possession game or a field position game. Possession game would be one where you want to keep the ball out of the hands of the other team's offense and maximize your scoring. What wasn't clear is whether or not they have 2 separate models for each, or if he is just more risk-averse in field position games. But they then qualify what type of game it is while it's happening. And every time a 4th down situation comes up, they make the recommendation to him from up top based on that criteria, and he decides from there.
Very interesting.
It makes sense, right? Because when you think about when people get all up in arms about 4th down decision making with McDermott, and he's not aggressive, he's doing this, blah 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 blah. I always go back to the Bucks game on Thursday night last year, which came off of that short week against the Patriots where they lost, and everyone was like very rightfully ready to axe Ken Dorsey, and they had some good scoring drives early in that game. but they punted like 3 times in the second half, like near midfield in kind of not great position to go for it on 4th down. It was like midfield, but it was like 4th and 4 or 4th and 5. And then I think there was like 1 4th and 2. But he chose to punt in all of those. But it made sense during that game because the Bucs offense really was not doing anything in that game. I think one of their touchdowns came off of a bad Josh Allen interception. And the defense really played well. It wasn't until the last like 2 drives that the Bucs had where they actually started to get points and move. But yeah, I mean, that kind of just tracks, right, with how he seems to perceive what's going on in a game to me.
Yeah. The McDermott aggressiveness conversation always kind of irks me a little bit because, look, there's been some mistakes for sure. But that being said, there's all these different charts and analytics that go into analyzing this. And consistently, McDermott is amongst the most aggressive coach or the most correct in being aggressive coaches in the NFL. And I think last night was the perfect example of that. That going for it for 4th and 2 there. Like it made sense against the Chiefs. It wouldn't have made sense against the Jets, for instance. All right. Maybe the Jets is the wrong example, but it made so much sense that when he did it, there wasn't a second in my head where I questioned, like, why is he doing this? The second he did that, I said, this is the right call. And if it had failed, the frustration I have is there's a lot of fans that would have been like, you got to kick the field goal. In fact, earlier in the game, wasn't there the same exact thing happened? Didn't they go for it on 4th down, didn't get it? And people were like, you got to kick the field goal there.
Yes.
And it's just like, you can't have it both ways. So when you go into these moments, you kind of have to stay with the same logic path that you've gone with the entire time as a fan. But for McDermott to change it based on opponent, I think that's smart. And it played out the way the Bills needed it to yesterday.
And yeah, there's obviously multiple ways to look about this because I think sort of as the conversation of 4th down decision making has evolved, it really hasn't in some ways where I think people just sort of tend to, and this is certainly me generalizing too much, but I think people use that Ben Baldwin like 4th down decision bot a little too much as gospel when it's more like this is based off of a single model that's trying to evaluate a decision in a vacuum, essentially. It's not taking all the different factors into account, like what kind of team this is, what kind of team they're playing, who is injured, who isn't, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. It's just general. And I think it's a good like starting point to at least think about it and sort of gauge where you want to be able to go for it and when to punt and all that sort of stuff. But like what McDermott said in this interview makes sense, and you see that playing out, and you see how that happens, and it makes sense based on sort of what we've seen play out during his time as the Bills head coach. And then on the other hand, you have somebody like a Dan Campbell who goes for it on 4th down, not because of some analytics grid or decision making. It's just because he feels like, hey, I've got 4 downs to use. I want to use them. And I want to be able to psychologically intimidate the other team by making them on edge and think that 3rd down is not always going to be the end for you.
Yeah.
That this is another chance for me to punch you in the mouth with this offensive line that I've created, with this running back room that is almost impossible to defend. Like, that's how he views 4th down. It's not from some chess match that's put together and thought of like how McDermott does. It's more about, hey, time to just punch some dude in the face. It's another chance to do it. We didn't do what we needed to do in those first 3 downs. We have another one. Let's go for it. Let's do it because we could do it. And that's fine. There's no right way to go about this necessarily. The more analytical approach allows you to be a little less emotional about it. But I would also argue that there are times that with Dan Campbell, because this is part of your identity and part of your culture, that the players aren't necessarily going to care about the analytics. They just like the fact that you believe in them, because it's not just believing in the offense and thinking that they can get it. It's believing in the defense and saying, if we don't get it, they will still be able to get the ball back for us. Like, it all ties together in some form or another.
Yeah, I do think, though, like with McDermott in particular, and he did kind of talk about it a little bit in the post-game press conference too, where he said like it was the team on the other side that kind of factored into this. But he also acknowledges that like he has Josh Allen. So all these analytics things kind of go out the window to some extent, because it's like if you need something, if he needs it, and the moments when you need it are late in a fourth quarter, late in a first half, let's say, he can rely on Josh Allen to, like, the analytics might not say like, oh, 4th and 3, go for it. But he's got this unique unicorn where he can be like, I don't really give a damn if the analytics say that, because those analytics factor in somebody like Aaron Rodgers at 40 years old on 4th down. It's like that's very different than what Allen is, and Allen's abilities are unique. So yesterday felt good for a lot of reasons. As somebody that likes Sean McDermott and thinks he's a good coach, it also felt good to see him literally outcoach Andy Reid. And I do really want to like put that in bold letters. He outcoached Andy Reid. So as much as people say, oh, he can't outcoach good coaches, like we just saw it. And I know it's not the playoffs, but we just saw him outcoach maybe the greatest coach of all time. We're in the conversation for greatest coach of all time. Again,
he's up there
to that extent. Yeah.
He's up there.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, it was just great from this offense all around. Obviously, Curtis Samuel, Cole Shakir, like we said, did a great job. Offensive line, I mean, not having Spencer Brown, and then Deion Dawkins came back in.
I think so. I think
Garage
got. Yeah, I think I think Garage only got a handful of snaps.
Yeah,
maybe one.
Yeah.
Oh, 3. He got 3 snaps.
Yes, 3 snaps, 4%. Good for him. Didn't notice. So, you know, listen, it's easy to say like, oh, well, he only played 3 snaps. It's like, listen, 3 snaps can a lot can happen in 3 snaps, and especially for an offensive lineman, and especially for a backup offensive lineman. So the fact that they didn't really miss a beat, and nobody was like, what's Richard Garage doing? Why is he the backup? Blah, blah, blah. It was fine. Everything was fine. And Ryan Van DeMark, great day from him, especially as a pass protector. Just did a really good job. The Bills did a great job picking up blitzes. It seemed like they really leaned into more Ty Johnson than anyone else down the stretch because of his ability to pass protect. And according to the snap count here, I mean, that's what happened. I mean, Ty 33. Johnson had 33, James Cook had 27, and Ray Davis had 15. Yeah. I mean, that was that, and you could see it. I mean, and the Chiefs, first of all, could not get pressure with 4, so it forced Spagnuolo to blitz, which he's totally fine with doing, but those blitzes have to get home. And they just were not, because the Bills were ready. The Bills were able to pick up a lot of these blitzes, a couple of them early on. Obviously, that Trent McDuffie play where he's able to get pressure on Allen. But really, especially in the second half, they just could not get near Allen. And even when they couldn't maximize their opportunities with it, because Allen can escape. It's exactly what happens. This is why you have to be able to get pressure with 4, because you have to have, it's just dart throws essentially at a certain point with a quarterback like Allen. It's like when you get a couple of opportunities against an Aaron Rodgers or a Kirk Cousins who are just statues and can't move around anymore, you'll probably sack them. With guys like Mahomes or Allen, you have to get as many opportunities as you can, because you know they're going to somehow escape and make a play out of it. So you have to get as much pressure as you possibly can. And for the Chiefs, they weren't able to do that. And that's a huge credit to the offensive linemen, to Aaron Cromer and Joe Brady for planning around those blitzes, and especially to Ty Johnson for being a reliable pass protector in those situations.
Yeah, Ty, I didn't even see those snap counts until we just talked about it and looking that up, and it just kind of goes to the intelligence, I guess, of the entire coaching staff of the Bills to say, like, obviously James Cook is our most talented running back. Obviously Ray Davis is probably the second most talented, but Ty Johnson's our best blocker. So we know they're going to send the house at Josh Allen. How can we buy Josh another 0.1 seconds? Because if, again, going back to the playoff game last year, if we could have bought Josh 0.1 more seconds, he hits Khalil Shakir for a go-ahead touchdown late in that game. But not only did the Bills do that, but they also relied on Josh, as they always do, to avoid sacks and essentially handle pressure. That did come. It wasn't a perfect game by the offensive line. Nonetheless, it was an impressive game by the offensive line. The one thing that gets me with Josh Allen that
Yes.
always goes under the radar, his ability to avoid sacks is not discussed nearly enough. He is quite possibly the best avoider of sacks, maybe of all time. That might be going a little far. I'd have to really go dive into the numbers, but he led the NFL last year with a sack rate below 4%. This year, he ranks third. The only two people ahead of him are Jordan Love and Derek Carr, who each have under 100 pass attempts fewer than Allen. Allen's at 369, Carr's at 321, and Jordan Love's at 3.02. But like, if you look at someone like Lamar Jackson, who's great and really good at avoiding sacks, his sack rate is 0.8 higher at 4.46. Like, Allen avoids sacks like nobody else. It's partially because you can't bring him down even when you get to him, and also because of his legs. And all of this, kind of like going back to last week for one real quick, against the Colts, Allen was sacked 2 times for a total of 0 yards. So in reality, he wasn't even sacked. He was literally tackled at the line of scrimmage. He is a freak in that regard, but the Bills provided him a game plan this week in particular to help protect him, give him just that couple seconds more to help get the ball to a banged up receiving core, which was important.
Very, very important. All right, we spent so much time on the offense and other stuff, but this defense was so good yesterday. I mean, the defensive line got pressure. You start the game with a turnover. Other than Xavier Worthy getting some big plays early on, which felt like the most spiteful thing
it was
ever. And I kind of respect them for doing it. Because I imagine if Keon Coleman were healthy, the Bills would be doing the same thing. But as you put in here in our notes, okay, big first half for Xavier Worthy, 4 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. No other receiver had over 30 yards, and that includes Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, and DeAndre Hopkins. Like, that's crazy to think about. And part of this, you could say, is just sort of how the Chiefs offense has evolved over the last few years, where, especially this year, their plan is to run the ball with Kareem Hunt, stay ahead of the sticks, and just have Mahomes be in these third and easy to manage situations. And it's worked for most of the year. And yes, that means you're going to be playing closer to the margins than they normally have, and that's why they've had so many close games this year. But at the end of the day, you also have Patrick Mahomes, so you feel confident in doing that because odds are 9 times out of 10, you're going to win those games. Oh, that worked so well. I wasn't really even going for it. I realized it when I said it. I was like, oh, this is perfect.
That'll get clipped.
Oh, the Bills beat them in that 10th game. That's great. Oh, that's great. We should end the show on that, but we're not going to. Yeah, and honestly, like, even though the Bills defense was not able to create many negative plays, or really any sort of negative plays against the run for the most part, they were able to come up with enough plays to limit this offense to 21 points, which is all they needed to do, really. I mean, they needed to basically keep this game from the Chiefs under 24 points, essentially. And mind you, one of the big things that I thought was going to be a factor coming into this game was no Harrison Butker. And it didn't really seem like that was ever a factor because they never really went for it in a situation where it was like, oh, they're going for this because they don't have the kicker. No, they operated the offense seemingly exactly how they needed to, how they wanted to. Obviously, a couple of mistakes here and there, which has been the case for the Chiefs when they've won 9 of their 10 games. But I mean, this is a team that, I mean, you look through the season, 27 points against the Ravens, that won them that game, 26 points against the Bengals, 22 against the Falcons, 17 against the Chargers, 26 against the Saints, 28 against the Niners, 30 against the Bucks, 27 against the Raiders, 16 against the Broncos, and now 21 against the Bills. So they've had games where they've been much more well operationed. That's not a word. That's not a phrase. What am I doing?
I think
they've looked better, right? They've proven they can be a good to solid offense that can put up more than just 21 points. But it really felt like they were pushing to get to 21 points. They were really, I don't want to say struggling, but it was a tough 21 points for them to get, in the same way that it was not an easy 30 points for the Bills to get. And the fact that the Bills were able to do that is all the more impressive because it's a really good defense. And the same thing with the Bills. This defense has not been like incredible for most of the season. It's been good, it's been solid, but this was definitely a big test for them. And to me, they really passed it.
Yeah, I felt like for most of the game, for two things. So one, the Chiefs' offense felt overmatched at points by the Bills' defense. Like the Bills' defense had them in a couple different spots, which I was surprised that they would. But the bigger part to me was that the defense looked different this week. It looked like they came into this game realizing that the opponent they were playing, and they played up to and beyond that opponent's level. And at points with this Buffalo Bills team, one thing I've struggled with is they played down to so many of their opponents. But this week, they decided we're going up and we're going above what they are. And they played with just this aggressive nature that I can't remember the last time seeing them like this. And it was at every single level. The defensive line was beating the snot out of that offensive line, including that trio in the middle that is elite and probably the best interior trio in the NFL. The linebackers were playing out of their minds. The corners, Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas, continue to just be absolute studs. And we already talked about the safeties. So you married that aggressive nature with the ability to kind of mitigate the holes and the areas of weakness for the team. And you brought it up, and I can't wait to watch more from Eric this week. But like the fact that Travis Kelce, who, you know, I saw somebody in the chat said that he's washed, but the last few weeks, man, he's had near 100 yards a game, almost 10 catches a game. Like he's getting fed and he's playing well. And this week he has 2 catches for I think 8 yards. Like that's a testament not only to the defense as a whole, but assuming Eric's correct, which he most likely is, Terrell Bernard being a legitimate difference maker and just a defense full of those difference makers that the rest of the NFL fandom, the rest of NFL analysts, and we talked about the guy that said Terrell Bernard's height, like nobody knows the players on this team. And that's astounding to me because there's so many damn good. No one knows who Christian Benford is. They have no freaking idea. He's not going to get an all-pro vote. He deserves one probably. And so does Terrell Bernard. So does Teron Johnson will win all-pro. But I just left the game yesterday saying all the players that have been stepping up all season seemingly stepped up. But on top of that, Ed Oliver finally showed up and Daquan Jones showed up and Von Miller made a play. And Greg Rousseau, though his stat line, which Aaron Quinn pointed out, isn't great. I think it's almost non-existent. Greg Rousseau was a menace the entire game and just confusing Patrick Mahomes. It was a all-around defensive performance that was so incredibly impressive against an offense that maybe it wasn't what it was in 2020 or 2021, but it's still damn good, and it still has Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback. Like, it was a good day. Good day.
Very good day. Let's see. RJ says Reed was absolutely trolling the Bills in the first half with all those worthy plays. Oh, like 100%. Worthy ran out of scripted plays. I mean, it kind of felt that way, right? And this was sort of the concern about Xavier Worthy, and especially with Andy Reid, right? Because this is sort of how he works in rookies into the offense. Is just sort of hey, let's put you in for these plays. You know, you've got speed, so let's put you on this weird reverse thing, and we'll put up a couple of deep throws and stuff like that. And this has been kind of my issue with the Chiefs' use of Xavier Worthy throughout the season is like coming out of college, Xavier Worthy at least showed some actual receiver skills that I wasn't expecting for someone like him, especially from that offense like him that he was in Texas. But I think that the fact that they're not even like using him in that sense is very odd to me, and I don't get that. I don't understand why they're kind of limiting what he does. And maybe it's just him. Maybe he doesn't have the timing in this offense. That definitely seems to be an issue, right? Is his timing with Mahomes, and maybe that's just part of it. I don't know. It just sort of seems odd to me. Music is life, love, self. How do you like a linebacker play so far, and do you think it can hold up until the playoffs? I mean, Terrell Bernard is fantastic, and we could spend an entire podcast talking about Terrell Bernard and just how incredible it is that this guy is as good as he is. And Dorian Williams, despite being put into a tough position filling in for Matt Milano, has performed admirably. It hasn't been perfect. He has his limitations. We all understand that, but he's physical. He comes downhill in the run game, and it's good to see. It's been a big plus for him to be able to do that. He's always going to struggle in coverage. That's just is what it is. But for the most part, he's been fine. And the fact that Matt Milano gets to come back sometime soon is great. And I just cannot wait for that to happen.
Yeah, Matt Milano next to Terrell Bernard is going to be insane to watch. And Dorian Williams has been really good. He's now the thing when Matt Milano comes back is Dorian's the floor. And the floor has been pretty damn good, especially as long as Terrell Bernard stays healthy. When Milano comes back, that ceiling explodes. And coming into this season, during the offseason at least, I remember there was a bunch of Pro Football Focus put out things. A bunch of people put out linebacker ratings, and none of them had the Bills in the top 10. And it just blew my mind. I'm like, yo, at the time we had Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, and they're like, oh, well, who's Terrell Bernard? He kind of sucks, or he's all right. And then Matt Milano's old. And it's like, well, let's see what happens when the two of them come back and play together for what essentially the first time in a long time. Like, they were really, really good last year at the start of the season. They're going to be really, really good again. And the Bills don't need to rush Milano back. That's also an exciting thing. They can slowly sprinkle him into certain plays and give him a rest here and there, as Dorian is more than capable of playing that position right now. The Bills are going to get better on defense. And if Milano can come back to 70% of what he was, this defense takes another step. And for a 9-2 team, taking another step is a really, really big deal.
Yeah. Right? that's all I got. Yeah. Roy Collins asked, most interesting games during our bye week. I'm sure that you will have plenty to say on that during your rooting interest article for this week. Just looking at the games right now, Rams Eagles has a lot of interest. That's Sunday night. Packers Niners tends to deliver in some form or another. Vikings Bears could get interesting because the Vikings are fine right now, but the Bears are fine right now, but that could get interesting. Other than that, I mean, like I said, Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks legacy game as they beat the Chiefs in Carolina. Yeah.
I think the two other ones are Patriots, Dolphins. The Patriots could beat that Dolphins team. Like they can. And if they do,
Dolphins have been playing pretty well though the last couple of weeks. I will give them credit.
But if the Patriots do beat them, it puts that magic number down to 1, which means the Bills need to win or Dolphins take a loss. And then the other one is Chargers Ravens. If the Chargers can, if the hard, I like that. If the Chargers can pull off that victory, the Ravens are going to start to get to a spot I don't think they're going to be comfortable in at 7-5. Like
yeah.
it seemed through the early part of the season. I know they lost the first two, but it did seem for a while like they're the best team in football. If they fall to 7-5 after this week, there's going to start to be questions of like, how good is this team? And is there any possibility they could actually miss the playoffs outright? I don't expect them to, but their schedule's kind of hard. And losing this week, losing 2 in a row would be a big deal.
It would. And this Ravens team has some like parts to it that are high level. Like when Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson are both doing what they're doing, that's borderline impossible to stop. Their defense is not very good right now, and they really struggle, especially against deep passing. And in general, they just don't have the answers that they used to have, which was the concern that I had coming into the season when you lose 3 guys to different jobs. In obviously Mike McDonald becomes the head coach in Seattle, and then Anthony Weaver goes to Miami. He was their associate head coach or assistant head coach and their linebackers coach. And Denard Wilson was their secondary coach. And Denard Wilson is cooking in Tennessee, despite the fact that team is not very good. And even Anthony Weaver, for a stretch there, was doing really well with the Dolphins defense. So clearly these were all very, very good guys. And I'm not trying to say like Zach Orr is like mincemeat or anything like that, but it's tough when you're being put in this position while also losing so much brain power around you. It's hard. It's hard to do to work within those constraints because you're inexperienced. You don't have people around you who are able to help kind of ease you along into this process. It's tough. It's a tough situation for them to be in. And it's going to be interesting. Like you said, down the stretch, this is a tough schedule for them. They're in a tough division where, even the worst 2 teams, Cincinnati and Cleveland, like Cincinnati could still go toe to toe with you.
Yeah.
Like as long as their defense isn't like a complete sieve, Joe Burrow is playing at such a high level that you cannot take your foot off the gas against that team. And Cleveland, Jim Schwartz is a good defensive coordinator. Yes, they took away talent from that team, but they're still capable of winning a game when they can. And they're another team. I mean, this was the team that stopped the Ravens winning streak, right? Jameis's first start was beating the Ravens. And so it's going to be very interesting down the stretch.
They're 2.5 games out of first now, which is a big deal. That's a big number with the head-to-head tiebreaker with Pittsburgh. And that fan base is so freaking weird. I have my own issues with them for a lot of reasons, but the one thing I see them they hate Roquan Smith, which is a whole thing too, which I'm like, Roquan Smith, probably a future Hall of Famer, and you hate him now because the entire defense has struggled. And of course, as much as I just described how aggressive and like intense the Bills defense was yesterday against the Chiefs, that's what the Ravens were against the Bills. Like that was that level of energy. The Ravens played their best game against the Bills, of course. I don't think that if these 2 teams met up again, that defense is going to have as good a game against Buffalo as they did. And I don't think that Bills offense or defense is going to have as bad a game against the Ravens as they did. So that game, some Ravens fans might want to think like, oh, they blow them out. They blow the Bills out again. It wouldn't be a blowout. I don't think it'd be a blowout either way. It'd be a damn good game.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Any other final thoughts that you have before we get out of here?
I mean, look, MVP doesn't matter until December because that award's based off of vibes and vibes alone. So the thing that sucks that I think all of us fans need to realize is that touchdown run that Allen had, that is an MVP moment. 49 out of 50 MVP voters don't believe that is true, and they will decide who wins based off of some goofiness that happens in December. Allen right now, for me, man, I would want to say he's the MVP. I think you might have to go with Jared Goff. You might have to say Jared Goff's the MVP. They're the 1 seed. That team's ridiculous. You might just have to give it to him because of the antiquated way that the voters have decided to vote on that. Everyone except for Aaron Schatz. That'll be a fun race to follow down the line. The only issue the Bills might run into is that they might have nothing to play for. So Allen might not have anything to do the last 2 weeks of the season.
It's fair. I lied. We're not going to get out of here right now because we have true or rubbish to do, like I said we were going to do, and we're going to do that right
Let's
now.
see if it's true or rubbish. Let's go.
Let's go, folks. If this is your first time joining the show, True or Rubbish is a segment in which I give Uber a statement. He will tell me if it is true or rubbish, and we discuss afterwards. If you want, feel free to follow along at home and get your thoughts in live to say whether you think it's true or rubbish. So, first thing, going back to the top of the show, in which, oh my gosh, can I even go back that far? Yes, I can. In which just the tip of canoe, one of our
What it do?
and loyal listeners of the show asks, before we get started, is soup a meal? So, true or rubbish, soup is a meal.
Do I get crackers?
Do you need crackers?
I might need crackers. This is a Seinfeld reference.
Oh,
by
I
the
know.
way.
I'm with
Okay.
you.
Okay. No,
Did he
soup's not-
crumble any crackers in it?
I love that scene.
So you're going with no. You're going with rubbish.
Rubbish.
It was rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
Go ahead.
Stew is a meal, but stew is not soup. The soup, it cannot be a meal. If I get a bowl of soup and somebody says that's my meal, I have about 5 hamburgers to eat after the fact, because there's no way in hell that one bowl of soup is going to satiate the hunger that is inside my belly.
So, believe it or not, I actually have multiple soup stories from when I was in college. So, when I was a sophomore, one of my, I was going to say friend, but I really don't like him. He was in our friend group at the time, and he said that he was going to make soup for everyone. I was like, I love soup, so I will gladly take
I
this.
too. Yeah.
He also asked us to help pay for it, which I felt was wrong, but whatever. This is the main reason why we did not like him, because he is someone that would hound you for every single dollar and cent that you owed him. Still not entirely sure all of that was correct, but whatever. So he spent so long making this soup, and I am starving at this point. He serves us this soup. It is the most flavorless, bland, nothing soup I've ever tasted in my life. I looked at my friend who was living next door to me in our dorms and would be my roommate the next 2 years. I said, "Are we getting pizza afterwards?" He's like, yes, please. I was like, this is horrible. And
you paid for it. And
I paid for it. That's the worst part. I helped pay for this bland, flavorless soup that this evil man concocted. Fast forward to senior year, I'm taking a class called Professional Communications. The professor for that, Dr. BPT, you could call her Dr. Beth Patrick Triple. You could call her Dr. BPT, but it had to be something doc. It had to be Dr. something.
Of course,
right?
Of course.
She was like, I've earned that title, and that's it. Yeah, I've spent a long time getting that degree. So anyway. She says, we're going to do some sort of speech. It's going to be sort of more relaxed. It's not going to be super strict on what the guideline is supposed to be. She's like, yeah, so we'll have you all at my house and we're just going to do these speeches there. And we're all like, why? And the worst part was it was on a Sunday in the fall, which meant no football for me. And this was 2017 when the Bills were trying to break the drought in McDermott's first season. And so I was like, this is not what I want to do. We walk in there. Nobody wants to be there. We're all very annoyed. But we walk in. She has not one, not two, 3 different soups that she made. And let me tell you something. Every single one of those was fire. They were
I love it.
Stupid good. So I would agree. Soup is not a meal. I think that's rubbish. But 3 soups? I could get a meal out of 3
Okay,
different.
so the S, so the pluralizing soup makes it a meal. I could agree with that. If you gave me a soup sampler, I probably would say that's a meal.
100%. 100%. All right. That was so much time on soup. We spent like 10 minutes talking about soup at the start and at the end of the show.
Sports Rock 2 would be Ryan.
Oh, we should have had him on. Oh, I gotta get his thoughts on this later. Anyway, next statement. We just talked about this. Josh MVP 2024. Yes or no? True or rubbish? Josh MVP.
Rubbish.
That is rubbish, all after all. It was all rubbish.
Put yourself out there.
I'm at a point where I don't think they'll give him the award. I don't think it matters what he does because they change the rules year in and year out. I've listened to narratives all day today of why Josh Allen is not the MVP by certain national analysts, and they're using the same logic that they used against Josh Allen last year to support Lamar Jackson this year, and Lamar Jackson is somehow going to get his third MVP of his career this season, even if they're the 7 seed, while Josh Allen could lead his team to the 1 seed, and they'd say, hey, you know what? He had 35 touchdowns. That's just not enough touchdowns. We've never seen an MVP like that before, even though we just saw that.
Just did. I'm going against the grain. I'm gonna say true. I think the narrative will be good for him. I think that they will look at this and say, before the season, we kind of thought the Bills would take a step back, and now they're in a position that they've basically never been in, where they're 9-2 and they just beat the Chiefs, who they knocked off from undefeated ranks. And I think the Bills will finish down the stretch really well, even if the Bills don't play their starters a whole lot in the last week or two. I think that they'll still look at Josh Allen and they'll ride that narrative and be like, this is his best season as a quarterback, despite losing high-level players in the offseason. So I'm going to go with true. And also because the field for the MVP race is not great. In fact, we're kind of getting to a point where, is Saquon Barkley in the MVP discussion at some point?
I mean, he's probably 5 right now. If you put I'm going to put Lamar, Josh, and Goff as the top 3, and then Derrick Henry I have to put ahead of Saquon, even though Saquon's having a great season. Derrick Henry's just silly when they give him the ball. They don't let him touch it in the fourth quarter. But
yeah, that's fair. Maybe I listen, as somebody who watches too much Philadelphia Eagles football that is and is arguably detrimental to my health. The Eagles would be completely lost if they did not have Saquon Barkley. They would have no idea what to do offensively without Saquon Barkley.
If he could just get 2 or 3 carries for the remainder of the season at the 1-yard line, instead of every single time he gets here, they're like, all right, Jalen, here's another touchdown for you, buddy.
You're not totally wrong there. All right, last one. In a somewhat weak head coaching cycle, at least in terms of candidates, and assuming that there's going to be a lot of openings with teams like the Cowboys, maybe even the Eagles if they don't finish well. We already have teams like Chicago and Jacksonville ready to fire their coaches, presumably. You've got the Saints and the Jets already with coaches fired. So, true or rubbish, Brian Daboll, Bills offensive coordinator in 2025.
No, rubbish. So much rubbish.
That is rubbish, all after all. It was all rubbish.
Go on.
The funny thing is, a lot of people on Twitter and some beat reporters that have already stumped to some extent for Brian Daboll return in the future, and maybe they did this last year, but I've seen them do it, are the same that also posted videos of the end of the Giants-Bills game where they did not shake each other's hands, they did shake each other's hands, but didn't really even want to look at each other. That relationship is too strained. So as long as Sean McDermott's here, Brian Daboll is not. And you know what? That might be for the best for the Bills, because I think people forget about the issues with that offense while Daboll was here. It was fine. It was good. In fact, 2020 was the best this offense has ever looked, maybe until this season. That being said, I don't ever see a world where Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll are on the same coaching staff again.
I was a big Brian Daboll fan. Still am to a certain extent. I think he's a good guy. I think he is trying his best to make something out of a genuinely awful situation with the Giants. And
Tommy DeVito.
You're gonna Tommy Cutlets, baby.
You're gonna name him the starter. Balls. That's malpractice. Tommy DeVito is not an
Tommy Gabagool to you, buddy.
Oh my god.
But the offense that the Bills needed in 2020 and in 2021 was what Daboll provided, in the sense that it was attacking, it was through the air, and it was a strong offense and worked well. But the style and the philosophy in which that worked isn't what the Bills are gearing towards, right? And it's not even what the NFL should be gearing towards. The NFL, with all of its too high shells and trying to prevent big plays through the air, is shifting more towards the running game again, as it should. And the Bills have been at the forefront of this, as they should, because they're kind of the ones who helped propel this initial trend of attacking downfield, like Allen and Mahomes and Jared Goff when he was with the Rams with Sean McVay. Like this, these were the sorts of things that pushed defenses to adjust. One of those defenses, again, being the Bills. And then the Bills were like, hey, if more teams start doing this, we need to be able to run the ball. And one of the biggest issues that McDermott seemed to have with Daboll was the fact that he wasn't going to commit to the run, or even commit to even a style of run. It was just sort of, all right, we've got a bunch of different run plays, but no run identity. Yeah. Whereas with the Bills now, I mean, the Bills with Aaron Kromer, with Joe Brady in particular, they have an identity in the run game. They have a clear sense of what to do in the run game. And I don't know if Joe Brady will be a head coach in 2025. Kind of seems like it's likely based on what I'm kind of projecting and looking at right now. But if he does, I don't know who the Bills will bring in or who they'll promote or whatever. I just cannot imagine Brian Daboll returning to this team. I just don't see it happening.
No, I don't see it.
Yeah. All right. Now that is it for us, folks. Thank you for joining us. As usual, it is wonderful to have you all on the show and interacting with us and having fun with us, especially after a game like that, which was incredible. Just really grateful for all of you for hopping on and getting your thoughts in, getting your comments in, wherever you guys are. It's really great to have everyone here tonight. We are looking forward to next week, even though it is a bye week. It's going to be great to just take a week off when you're 9-2 in this position and be able to watch how the rest of the league unfolds during that time. Thank you all for joining us again. If you are one past subscriber, thank you for supporting us that way. If you're not, it's $60 a year. Go to cover1.net. It is the best $60 you'll spend all year on football. Exclusive access to news, articles, insights, analytics, and a community of people that you want to be around, and you can't ask for much more than that. $60 a year, cover1.net. You also get a shirt, and it's pretty cool. I won't lie. It's pretty great. So, and that is courtesy of one of our network sponsors in 26 shirts. So sign up for Cover One Pass. It's totally worth it. Best $60. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We will see you all next week.